Hello and welcome to this channel. Our popular culture is a desert island full of hidden treasures. Much of the wisdom of the ancients survives utterly deformed but recognizable for the trained eye. When old ideas and expressions are not understood anymore, they get a new meaning. But beneath that new meaning, the original sense sleeps undisturbed. A good archaeologist with a good shovel can unearth quite a lot. Take for example the expression sixth sense. You may have heard about it as a kind of intuition or premonition. Whatever moderns understand of it, the sixth sense is a gateway to a forgotten world that lies behind ours. As its name suggests, it is a faculty through which we grasp a reality that can't be grasped through the five senses. The sixth sense is not opposed primarily to reason, as you may have heard in popular culture being an intuitive faculty. It is opposed to the five senses through which we perceive the sensible world, and opens to us the intelligible world that underlies everything visible. It is beyond discursive reason because reasoning unfolds in time, so it only has access to things that exist in time. But for the transcendent realities that lie in the intelligible world beyond the reach of time, we need a faculty that itself transcends time. In the everyday life, the operation of this faculty will be perceived as a sudden intuition. The Renaissance Platonist Marsilio Ficino, in his commentary on the Philebus, a Platonic dialogue, says that, quote, "Among the wise men of Greece arose the saying that Plato had three eyes, one with which he looked at human things, another at natural things, another at divine things, which was in his forehead, while the others were under his forehead." Origen, in his Contracersum, that's 6th book, section 8, says that Plato prided himself on having a third eye. Also, Olympiodorus of Alexandria, or someone of his circle, tells the story that after arriving at his theory of transcendent ideas, Plato dreamt that he had a third eye. This third eye on the forehead is there to look beyond the veil of the sensible world and see the intelligible. What this third eye is not hard to guess. According to Ficino, Diogenes the Cynic said he couldn't see Plato's ideas. Plato replied he obviously didn't have an intelligence with which to see them. So the third eye, the sixth sense, with which we see the intelligible universe, is the intellect. We have our five senses to perceive the living, breathing horses, but we have the sixth sense to grasp the one nature that makes all of these animals into a species. An individual horse is a particular being. The species is a general being, while the horseness that defines the species and the individuals in it is the universal being. Without this universal being, the horses would not exist as horses. It is the transcendent universal that acts as former principle, that makes the difference between an informed blob of flesh and a living horse. The same transcendent idea makes the horse knowable to our mind as a horse. Notice that authentic knowledge is a grasping of the unity behind the multitude. In the Republic, Plato says the following: "It is also the greatest test of who is naturally dialectical and who isn't. For anyone who can achieve a unified vision is dialectical, and anyone who can't isn't." That's the Republic 357c. What Plato calls here dialectic is the science above the Pythagorean mathematical sciences. It is through the Platonic dialectic that we know the transcendent ideas, and this dialectic consists, as we can see, in finding the unifying principle behind the multitude. Applying this dialectical unification to the world of ideas themselves, we arrive to the ultimate idea, which is what Plato called the good, or the one, beyond the plurality. We can call it the first principle. Did you notice that our Latin-speaking ancestors called the world a universe? What does this mean? It means that it is an inherent quality of the world to tend towards versus the one, as the first principle. That is where we come from, and that is where we shall return. To access the sixth sense in us, we have to turn our mind away from the five senses and recollect it in itself, as Plato says in the Phaedo. Quote, "As I say, the lovers of learning know that philosophy gets hold of the soul when it is in that state, then gently encourages it, and tries to free it by showing them that investigation through the eyes is full of deceit, as it is that through the ears and the other senses. Philosophy then persuades the soul to withdraw from the senses in so far as it is not compelled to use them, and bids the soul to gather itself together by itself, to trust only itself and whatever reality existing by itself the soul itself understands, and to not consider as true whatever it examines by other means, for this is different in different circumstances, and is sensible and visible. whereas what the soul itself sees is intelligible and invisible. That's from the Phaedo 83b. In the Republic, Plato writes explicitly about an art of turning the soul, he periagoge tekne. The context is that of the myth of the Cavern. In this famous Platonic myth, we meet a group of humans kept in chains in a cave gazing at the back wall, not realizing that the shadows that they see reflected on it are just that, reflections. One of them turns his head and realizes their predicament. He ascends through the cave and goes out. Once his eyes are adjusted, he can see things, and finally, when his eyes are strong enough, he can look directly in the sun. This is an extended metaphor about the role of education and the Pythagorean mathematical sciences that are supposed to turn the soul from the darkness to daylight, and then lead the philosopher to more and more intense light. Through this myth and the whole section, knowledge is represented through the sense of seeing, and the mind is described as an eye. Quote, "The instrument with which each learns is like an eye that cannot be turned around from darkness to light without turning the whole body. This instrument cannot be turned around from that which is coming into being without turning the whole soul until it is able to study that which is, and the brightest thing that is, namely the one we call the good. Education is the craft concerned with doing this very thing, this turning around, and with how the soul can most easily and effectively be made to do it. It isn't the craft of putting sight into the soul. Education takes for granted that the sight is there, but that it isn't turned the right way or looking where it ought to look, and it tries to redirect it appropriately. That's the Republic 518 from C to D. As we can see, education, or paideia, which is the heart and soul of classical tradition, is not about accumulating knowledge, but about reorienting the soul. This kind of knowledge gives access to the essence of things, that gives them unity instead of the appearances that manifest themselves to our five senses. By ascending into the light, we ascend along the great chain of being towards the source of unity in our own soul. So this knowledge renders our soul better ordered and more harmonious. It is this turning of the soul that is, according to Plato, true philosophy. See the Republic 521c. The sciences that philosophers have to study, in order to be able to ascend out of the cave, are the mathematical sciences that go back to the Pythagoreans at least. Arithmetic studies number, geometry, number in space, harmony or music, number in time, and finally astronomy, number in time and space. These constitute a quadrivium of the seven liberal arts as they have been known to the West. The study of these sciences has nothing to do with modern so-called scientific endeavors. The reason why a philosopher will study them is to detach the mind from the senses and to orient it inside, far away from the bodily senses. The advantage that they have is their abstract character, that cuts away the mind from the visible world. As strange as it may seem, the mathematical sciences have become in the West so abstract precisely as aids to a spiritual exercise in shaping the soul. The Platonic tradition is not interested in the practical empirical uses of mathematics, as good as they may be in their respective sphere. It is interested in purifying the soul and preparing it for the contemplation of the first principle, the transcendent one. Only a sufficiently cleansed soul will be able to achieve that level of contemplation at the end of a long and arduous journey. The closest equivalent for the use of mathematics in the Platonic tradition is that of the cleansing practices of the mysteries that culminate in the epopteia or vision. This is what Plato has to say about the common use of a science like astronomy. Quote, "In my opinion, your conception of higher studies is a good deal too generous. For if someone were to study something by leaning his head back and studying ornaments on a ceiling, it looks as though you'd say he's studying not with his eyes but with his understanding. Perhaps you're right and I'm foolish, but I can't conceive of any subject making the soul look upward except one concerned with that which is, and that which is invisible. If anyone attempts to learn something about sensible things, but by gaping upwards or squinting downward, I'd claim, since there is no knowledge of such things, that he never learns anything, and that even if he studies lying on his back, on the ground, or floating on it in the sea, his soul is not looking up, but down." That's the Republic 529b. Plato is playing here with a literal and metaphorical sense of looking upwards. According to the metaphorical sense, looking up is about turning away the mind from the senses and opening it up to the intelligible. In this sense, somebody who studies the celestial bodies in order to know the celestial bodies themselves is looking down. That is because the earth is in fact the mythical representation of the corporeal existence, while the underworld and the heavens represent infracorporeal physical residues of the soul and the spiritual or immortal soul respectively. What astronomy should teach to the philosopher is that the harmony of the celestial spheres is a visible manifestation of an intelligible harmony. This is the essence of the mythocosmos, or the universe as an ensemble of symbols, itself a giant symbol that points beyond itself. It is a curious fact that modern science likes to define itself in opposition to medieval geocentrism. According to the official view, heroic scientists battled with their telescopes the retrograde priestcraft of a bygone age, to usher in a new view of the universe, one that does not see Earth in the center anymore. The reality is more disheartening, however. What happened was that with the advent of modern science, the whole universe was treated as an empirical reality. In other words, the earthly level of existence was extended to the whole cosmos. No traditional society dared even to contemplate such a hardline geocentrism. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumb up and share it with your friends. If you have observations to make, or you think that I glossed over something that should have been said, or you think that I'm simply wrong, share that in the comment box.